You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 570, Good Shepherd.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm Ashley Thomas, sitting in for Norman Lau. Each week on Mission Log, we set out on a mission to explore an episode of Star Trek for the morals, meanings, and messages. But the real mission is in here. The one of getting to know each other and, of course, asking ourselves if the stories stand the test of time.
This week, Good Shepherd, the one where Janeway leads a group of quirky misfits on their first away mission. Between the hull damage, the creepy aliens, and Neelix's suit, maybe they should have just stayed at home safe in Voyager's lower decks. Ashley, welcome to Mission Log. It's so great to have you. For anybody who doesn't know already, you are already a co-host on a Roddenberry podcast called Genealogy, which everybody should be listening to. Tell us what you're up to over there.
Sure, yeah. So myself, alongside the illustrious Earl Green, we talk all about Gene Roddenberry's pre-Star Trek TV writing. So we've covered a lot of his work so far, like Have Gun Will Travel, The Detectives. We just finished a series called Wrangler, which is the first series Gene Roddenberry got past the pilot stage. So we had scripts to work from, but I was lucky enough to get to take a little field trip out to LA with Mission Log prodigy Charlene Schmidt, and the two of us got to watch all 7 recorded episodes of Wrangler together, including the pilot that you did not get to see, John Champion.
I know. You have seen one more episode than I have, so I got to go back to UCLA. I got to check it out. I am so excited that you did that. Really, to the whole team, doing the amount of detective work that you did on Wrangler. And now is the time, folks. If you haven't checked it out, we now have, as definitive as it can be, at least right now, the complete collection of discussion and analysis of that show. So go to podcast.roddenberry.com, click on Genealogy, and listen to Ashley and Earl and special guest star Shar's takes on these shows. So wonderful to have you on board for that. Wonderful to have you here today to talk about Voyager because, of course, you are a huge Star Trek fan.
I am.
And you've done a little bit of Trek blogging. Where can people find you for that?
Sure, yeah. So I am the Trekspert in residence at fangirlish.com. So if you go to fangirlish.com and search Star Trek, chances are I wrote it. So I've been covering all of the Paramount Plus Star Trek series since Discovery Season 3. That was when I started writing for Fangirlish. So,
excellent.
So you can find me there. You can also hear me talk about Star Trek on We Are Starfleet on the Film Stories Podcast Network.
Perfect. All right. When speaking of where people can find you, why don't you tell people where to find all of us?
Absolutely. So, folks, we would love to hear from you. Mission Log is a conversation about Star Trek. Find us on Facebook at Mission Log Pod and Threads at Roddenberry Podcasts. The conversation always continues in the Mission Log Discord with near-daily live events and 24/7 chat about the topics you love. Get your invitation to our private server by joining patreon.com/missionlog. And while you're at it, one of the most important ways to help the podcast you love is to leave a 5-star rating and review at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. And always remember, folks, your comments could be used on the show, so please say something nice. We would appreciate that.
This is good habit, right?
It is.
Say something nice whenever possible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
To quote the great philosopher Thumper, if you can't say nothing nice, don't say nothing at all.
Good.
Now, folks, here is John Champion with this week's trivia.
All right, let's get into it. Good Shepherd. We have a story by Diana Gito, a new name for us here in the world of Star Trek, and I'm afraid that's where the trail ends. Diana has no more professional credits in the industry that we could find. If anybody has a lead, let us know. We have a teleplay, though, which is co-credited to Diana and Joe Menosky. So probably not a surprise there, since Joe has the bulk of his credits on Voyager, and he likely took the lead in shaping the script for the story. Although we are getting toward the end of Joe's run, he has just 4 more credits to go out of his very impressive 36 episodes credited on Voyager. Now, this one was directed by Heinrich Kolbe, and just like Joe, Rick is also coming to the end of his run on Voyager. We most recently covered his episode Dragon's Teeth, and he's got just 2 more to go until we catch him one more time on Enterprise. Now, the title of today's episode, Good Shepherd, of course, it is name-checked in the episode, and they tell us what the reference is in the episode. But very specifically, it is a biblical parable, which you can look up, John 10, verses 11 through 15. Now, let's meet our guest stars. We meet 3 new crew members this week. Well, actually, if I'm being precise, we actually meet more than 3 new ones, but there's 3 who we really get to know. First up, there is Billy Telfer, played by Michael Rice. Now, Michael got his start as an actor in the late 90s, and he racked up a huge number of voice credits in addition to his on-camera work. He has provided voices for everything from Digimon to Transformers to 2 Star Trek video games. But at the same time as his acting career, Michael was also developing a writing and producing career. Now, notably, he has worked on Charmed, The Client List, In Plain Sight, and here's a Trek actor crossover. He wrote and produced on Boston Legal with William Shatner. Now, next up, we have Bajoran Tal Celeste, played by Zoe McClellan. And it's very likely that Zoe has a familiar face. She got her professional start a few years before this episode, and then soon after, she landed a number of recurring roles on some very prominent shows. She was Jennifer Coates on JAG, she was Lisa on Dirty Sexy Money, and she had an impressive run on NCIS New Orleans alongside another Star Trek star, Scott Bakula, and she will be back for one more appearance on Voyager. And finally, Mortimer Heron is played by Jay Underwood, and what an interesting, eclectic acting resume for Jay. Okay, his breakout role was starring in The Boy Who Could Fly, and yeah, he was that boy, Eric. And then soon after, he played the android Chip Carson in a series of TV movies for Disney called Not Quite Human. He played Sonny Bono in And the Beat Goes On, a TV movie based on Sonny Bono's autobiography. He turns up on The X-Files, Superboy, and The West Wing. And in an episode of The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, he played Ernest Hemingway. And to top it all off, Jay appeared in a 1987 ABC after-school special called The Day My Kid Went Punk, co-starring Bernie Coppell, and that is your Love Boat crossover. Now, Ashley, at the top of the trivia, or at the top of the guest star segment, I mentioned that we were only really focusing on these 3, but we do run into a couple of other guest stars, a couple of new crew members on Voyager. We don't really spend a lot of time with them, but there's one in particular that caught your eye, and that is Tom Morello. Tell us about Tom.
So Tom Morello is the famous guitarist from Rage Against the Machine and is also apparently a massive Trek fan. This is not his first Trek appearance. So in this episode, he plays Crewman Mitchell. You see Janeway get to have a little conversation with him in the hallway. But his first Star Trek appearance was actually in Star Trek's Insurrection as a Sanaa officer. So
excellent.
There you are. He is uncredited in that one. But I was like, when I didn't recognize his face because I am face blind. It's bad. It's real bad. But when the credits started rolling, I was like, wait a minute. Tom Morello was in this. Rewind. Let's fix this.
I love it anytime you get a celebrity Star Trek fan and they get to make their dream come true and be on Star Trek.
Yeah. I need to listen to more Rage Against the Machine. I have a lot of rage, although I don't know if it's against a particular machine.
Wherever it's placed, you have rage. Yeah.
Indeed.
Welcome to the Delta Quadrant. Sooner or later, everyone gets an away mission. Hopefully nobody gets eaten by a lizard or anything. You wouldn't believe the paperwork involved.
Prologue. Janeway's got that big cup of coffee again as she stares out a window from her ready room. Chakotay arrives with updates. Seven wants to present her efficiency report. And in other news, Voyager will soon pass through a cluster of gas giants and other interesting phenomena. While it's not worth changing course, Janeway decides to send the Delta Flyer in for a closer look. On the bridge, Chakotay tells Tom to prep the flyer and Harry to start scanning. In astrometrics, Seven works with crewman Tal Celeste to relay orders to engineering, where B'Elanna makes power adjustments before passing the job down the chain to Deck 15, literally the bottom of the ship. There, Mortimer Heron, a surly crewman, barely looks up from his very complicated calculations that he claims will overturn theories about the Big Bang. Just a little light personal hobby. But he processes the engineering orders to reroute power and then gets back to his own work, literally and figuratively disconnected from the rest of the ship and its crew. Act 1. Remember those crew members we just met? Time to meet one more. Tal Celeste is up late, struggling with a complex sensor analysis. She calls on her hypochondriac friend, crewman William Telfer, occasionally Billy to his friends, for help and insists that they solve it over comms even while their roommates try to sleep. The next morning, during Seven's efficiency report, the senior staff discusses problem officers, and guess whose names come up? Tal Celeste, constantly making errors, Billy always in sickbay despite perfect health, and Heron has buried himself in theoretical physics on Deck 15, avoiding all interaction. They've never been on a working away mission, never volunteered for anything. Janeway sees an opportunity. Not to cut them loose, but to challenge them. There is that cluster to investigate. In the mess hall, Billy tutors Celeste, but when Janeway overhears, she joins in, rattling off the correct algorithm before handing them their mission assignments. Then she ventures into the ship's lowest deck, getting lost before finally tracking down Heron in the plasma relay room. He's stunned by her presence and does not seem too keen on the idea of joining the mission, but the captain makes it clear he's going whether he likes it or not. Act 2. In astrometrics, Janeway briefs her new away team on the mission. Celeste will handle sensor analysis, Telfer will look for signs of life, and Heron will study subspace decay. When they're dismissed, Seven does not hold back about the team's qualifications, but Janeway explains this mission isn't just about exploring the cluster, it's about giving those lost crew members a chance to prove themselves. She name-checks the title, polite golf clap please, and relays the story of the Good Shepherd, determined to bring her own wayward flock back into the fold. Later in the mess hall, Neelix, Tom, and B'Elanna watch Heron sitting alone. Tom attempts to make conversation, but Heron shuts him down with an equation-heavy pad and a pointed insult. Nobody is making new friends today. Meanwhile, Telfer panics about an imaginary prion infection, prompting the doctor to put his foot down about his hypochondria and refuse any excuse to skip the mission. Aboard the Delta Flyer, Janeway pilots into the cluster while Celeste begins scanning. There's a little bump along the way, probably nothing, just some background noise, Celeste figures, but Janeway double-checks the work and reassures her. Later, over lunch prep at the Flyer's replicator in the aft, Celeste and Telfer bond over their shared wish to be anywhere else, joking about hitching a ride in an escape pod. On the flight deck, Janeway tries to chat with Heron, but he derails the conversation with his views on genetics and disdain for space travel, then excuses himself to join the others for lunch. Before Janeway can regret bringing him along, the ship is violently rocked, and the Flyer loses a good-sized chunk of the hull. Celeste, Telfer, and Heron in the aft compartment aren't responding. Act 3. The Delta Flyer is dead in the water, its antimatter nearly drained, and the lunch crew make it back to the flight deck. The ship's antimatter is mostly neutralized, and Heron theorizes that they were hit by a dark matter protocomet, something he wrote a paper on and everything, so it must be it. But Janeway isn't ready to jettison the warp core just yet to throw off any antimatter-seeking comets. Instead, Celeste suggests analyzing the damaged hull plate, and Janeway agrees. Science! While working, Celeste confesses her insecurities, believing she only got into Starfleet because Bajorans were in demand. She doesn't think she belongs on Voyager, but Janeway sees potential in her unconventional thinking. Meanwhile, Telfer distracts himself with his usual self-diagnoses, while Heron works, coming close to an injury while Telfer was distracted. Heron lashes out, pointing out that relying on inept crewmates is why he prefers the solitude of Deck 15. Telfer, ever the optimist, suggests that he try spending time with others for once, but Heron has no interest in testing that hypothesis. Janeway proposes a solution to their dilemma, reigniting the warp core using radiogenic particles from a nearby gas giant. But before they can get there, another spatial fluctuation appears. Janeway opens a channel, then fires a photon torpedo to test if this is indeed a dark matter protocomet they're dealing with. A comet it's not, but a very strange sound permeates the ship, and then, following his whimper, oh no, Telfer vanishes. When he reappears, he's gasping and falls to the floor. "Inside me," he stammers, as something wriggles beneath his skin. Act 4. Janeway and the team rush Telfer to the biobed, but the transporter and tricorders can't detect the creature inside him. Janeway theorizes it's a dark matter life form, but Heron dismisses the idea as impossible. Telfer describes being taken to a place with no air, no light, just darkness. Celeste reassures him that if the aliens meant harm, he'd already be dead. Janeway seals him in a force field and leaves Celeste to monitor him while she and Heron return to the bridge. Heron grumbles that they never should have left Voyager, but Janeway points out that nowhere is truly safe, reminding him of the Borg, Vidians, Species 8472. He dodges any discussion of friendships with the crew. Suddenly, a distorted version of their own distress call plays back in the same dispersal pattern as the dark matter anomalies. Janeway believes it's an attempt at communication. But before they can respond, Telfer walks through the force field, his body no longer under his control. Janeway stuns him with a phaser, and a creature emerges from his neck, latching onto a console and wreaking havoc on the ship's systems. Janeway orders Heron to hold fire, but he panics and vaporizes the alien. Furious, Janeway berates him for destroying their chance at first contact, and Telfer says that he could hear the creature's thoughts about not belonging there. But there's no time to dwell. Another hull section is ripped away. With no other options, Janeway sets the Delta Flyer on a course into the gas giant's rings, hoping the extreme environment will throw off the creatures and allow them to restart the warp core before they're crushed. Act 5. The Delta Flyer enters the radiogenic rings, pulling in particles to reignite the warp core. Janeway checks on Telfer, who surprisingly feels pretty good. He admits his hypochondria has been like a constant red alert, but facing real danger put things in perspective. Janeway shares her childhood fear of the ocean and how she overcame it through zero-G training in the Coral Sea. Celeste reports that the dark matter aliens are closing in, and the flyer won't have enough time to restart the warp core. Janeway orders the others to abandon ship, but Celeste and Teller refuse. They want to stay and help. Heron, however, takes the escape pod, but instead of heading for safety, he veers straight toward the aliens. The crew scrambles to beam him back, but he's out of range. Just before impact, they manage to lock onto his pod and pull him in, then fire aft phasers at a radiogenic rock, triggering a chain reaction that propels them out of danger. A massive shockwave overtakes the flyer, hitting the crew a few seconds after Celeste predicted. Back on Voyager, Chakotay approaches Janeway in sickbay and asks what happened. She asks if there are any signs of any other vessels or entities around, and he says no. As for her time on the mission, Janeway says the Good Shepherd went in after some lost sheep and ran into a wolf. When Chakotay asks if she found them, she smiles, lying back on the biobed. I think she did. The end.
Fantastic job on the recap, John. I would even say you did good.
Thank you. Did I do good shepherding in that story into our conversation? I
believe you have done a good job shepherding the recap for our listeners.
All right.
So that they are in the fold.
Oh, good. Well, that's what I want. I want all of our listeners in the fold here.
I like it.
This teaser segment is really interesting because throughout this episode, I don't know if it was Rick Colby flexing his muscle, if it was production, if it's, Rick and Brannon and maybe Joe Menosky and others saying, hey, let's change things up a bit. Maybe we found a few bucks in the budget, but wow, do they get creative with this opening sequence?
Yeah. I had that in my notes. I really loved you're zooming in and there's Janeway looking out a window.
Yeah.
And then you do that. I really like that. The other thing I had down is basically once Janeway tells Chakotay about
the cluster. Yeah.
Basically, you follow Chakotay, and it's nothing. The camera doesn't stop moving.
Yes.
Until the unnamed crewman, I didn't catch it.
Yeah, coming from engineering.
Engineering gets down to deck 15 to talk to Heron.
Who, by the way, okay, so here's the thing. That crewman has a similar look to Tom Morello.
But is not
Tom Morello. And I just think, if you want to make a Tom Morello stand out, just put somebody, let's bring back Lieutenant Carey. Why isn't Baxter carrying that pad down to deck 15? Because if he runs into trouble, Baxter can take care of it. But but anyway, Tom Morello grabs the pad.
Yes. Did you catch the guy's name, or did they even give him a name?
There is a name credited. If you go to Memory Alpha, you can get a name for him. But he is just crewman.
Gotcha.
He is this engineering crewman. Yeah,
engineering crewman. All right. Well. But I really liked that camera work. I thought that was really interesting. I felt like, okay, something's happening. This is a busy day on Voyager. I really liked
for
that.
A show that very often just focuses on its main characters, and we keep saying it would be so nice to get to know other characters and just see the ship being busy. Not only do they do that here, but the camera work really reinforces that. And it just, going back to the effects of it all, shades of The Cage, that famous shot of swooping in on the bridge dome and seeing people at work. Shades of early TNG. I think is it in Encounter at Farpoint, and then maybe we see it again in Best of Both Worlds Part 2. I can't remember, where you're pulling out from the captain's ready room and kind of going into space. So we just don't do that very often. But it's nice to see those shots here and just give a little scale to it. Just that's where that room exists,
Yeah. I really like that. You open the show by the zoom in, and the prologue ends
with
zooming
the zoom
out.
It's so nice.
Yeah,
and in between
that was really cool.
And we do meet some new lower deckers, which is great. By the way, why are all of these orders delivered on a pad?
I think if we just keep asking this question, John, we're never going to get an answer.
Don't
so
ask.
Just go with it. Just go with it. It's fine.
Okay.
They didn't know about Bluetooth in this was
2001
when this
was
I
think.
2001. Yeah. They didn't know about Bluetooth yet. Yeah. So it's okay.
Yeah. Good call.
Okay.
Good call. Okay, here's my other question. Why do we let 7 of 9 have this kind of power?
If somebody's going to tell you about efficiency, you might as well give it to the former board.
Yeah, but then everybody just kind of sits around and takes it, and nobody's happy to be there. Even Tuvok is just okay, with the phaser rifles. All right, fine, whatever.
I think if anybody could lecture Tuvok about efficiency and get away with it, it would be 7 of 9.
Yeah.
Anybody else would be refuted with Vulcan logic.
I think so. Yeah.
Fine, the board can tell me.
Right.
Or the former board.
Yeah. I also, I wondered if somebody needed to remind Chakotay that they only have about 140, give or take, people on board, because he's like, they're not good. You should just relieve them of duty. How? What do you do with 3 people if they're relieved of duty? What do you do with them, first of all, if they're not pulling their weight? But doesn't this reflect on your ability to be a commander and everybody under you who is also in command of them?
I was thinking about that. It's if this were a normal starship, then yeah, he was right. They would be reassigned elsewhere to where, they can do something more their speed or their interest,
Sure.
ability level or whatever. You are dealing with a legacy ship situation here.
Yeah.
It's not optional. Everybody has to know how to do something in the event that whoever knows how to do this certain thing gets offed.
Yeah.
Or dies suddenly in some way. So that's an issue there. Can I circle back real quick? Something I kind of bristled against in this opening sequence is when B'Elanna gets the pad and it's hey, Seven wants this. She goes, "What's our board queen want?" Now it's like, come on, girl. No, that's not okay. I didn't like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. B'Elanna's prickly, and that's fine.
But you need to hold that in check, especially when you're at work with your subordinates.
Yeah, no, I didn't feel like that was appropriate. I mean, yes, sure, you got B'Elanna. She's always got her sassy pants.
Yeah,
on, but
right.
I just didn't care for that. I didn't care for that.
I have to agree with you. Deck 15. Is that Janeway's first time there since maybe the ship left space dock? Because Voyager is only 15 decks high. It only has 140-ish crew members. And from my understanding, if you're the captain of a ship, look, you may not be going to every deck every day, but it is your responsibility to know the ins and outs of the operation of your ship. I would imagine once every week or so, there has got to be a grand tour to take in everything. It seems a little weird. Now, I like Deck 15. I do. I love the cramped quarters. I love the attitude down there. But it just seems like somebody should be down there a little more frequently. Even 7 of 9. Hey, look, I mean, she knows the ship inside and out, too.
Yeah. I think all of that's fair. I hadn't quite thought about it in those terms, but I think that is a fair assessment. Having been a manager, I can definitely see how things slip through the cracks, and this is something I'll get into a little later in our discussion. But if you're preoccupied with bigger things, sometimes things that don't need as much attention. One of my regional managers said he spent 80% of his time with 20% of his stores. Yeah. Because those 20% needed more attention. And while mine wasn't one of those 20%, I still needed some attention, but I didn't quite get as much unless I really pushed for it.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I get that. And when I love this encounter with Janeway, because you said earlier, and maybe it was offline, that Janeway is your captain, and
she is.
This series, we see the best of Janeway, we see the worst of Janeway, we see versions of Janeway that maybe feel inconsistent with the Janeway that we know and love. This episode has got a lot of peak Janeway in it. And there is just a line that she delivers to Heron down on Deck 15. He's like, I don't want to go on a mission. And she goes, I didn't ask what you want. that to me, peak Janeway. Love that moment.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, would agree. This Heron guy.
This guy.
I'm watching this now, and it's like, this man is the Sheldon Cooper of Voyager. Because he's like, this isn't what I want. I want to be down here doing my theoretical physics.
Sure.
or whatever you want to call it. Yeah. I have 2 English degrees, so forgive me if I get the science terms wrong. But all I could think about was like, man, this guy is Sheldon Cooper. The physics are theoretical, but the fun is real. And this is his idea of fun.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Oh, my gosh. I thought Janeway was very patient with him because he had his sassy pants on.
Yeah. And to the captain, Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, Captain Janeway, what are you doing down here? Are you lost? So obviously Janeway's not spending a ton of time down there anyway, or at least not that he's seen her. Yeah. But, he's like, this is pity. I don't want it. I was like, no! You have been told by your captain you're going on an away mission. You don't say no.
Yeah, exactly.
I can't imagine a scenario in when you would push back against that order.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, I was just like, man, he's lucky that he didn't get Janeway didn't even give him the death stare.
No.
Like, I was like, bro, you are lucky to be alive.
Yeah, he escaped. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, man. You know, you were talking about peak Janeway lines. You know, she references the parable of the Good Shepherd. And she says, I won't abandon a member of this crew no matter what their problems might be. And I love that line because that's who Janeway is at her core.
So good.
That's one of the things I admire most about Janeway is that, you know, she's your captain and she's got your back.
She gave that lesson to Naomi Wildman. You don't leave anybody behind. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, keep your shirt tucked in, don't leave anybody behind. Yeah. But it's given a little more nuance because she says it to Seven. Yeah.
Very true.
You know, Seven who can relate to having issues and struggling to fit in with the crew.
And somebody
that gives it more weight.
And somebody who Janeway has needed to go and recover a couple of times. So yeah, Seven has been the beneficiary of that attitude. Yeah. So I am still sort of enjoying, but also a little maybe disturbed that Janeway has to do the work that the rest of the crew should have been doing all along. Like, Chakotay, what are you doing with your time here that you're not, watching after the crew who might be slipping through the cracks? But we will come back to that in the next segment because you said you had some notes about how that happens. So
yeah, have thoughts on that, but even so, I admire that Janeway's like, nope, I'm the captain. Yeah. It's my responsibility. Yep. Like, yes, she's the, it's the ultimate responsibility.
I do like that too. The buck has to stop somewhere. Yeah. Let's cut to the mess hall because here's Tom and B'Elanna. First of all, we have the reference to the TV. Glad that that's still around, But
Love it.
But there's also there's something about this scene that kind of bothers me because it's like they just don't get it at first. And of course, it's Neelix who has to have some voice of compassion and reason. Like, no, don't just make fun of the guy. Like, reach out, extend a hand in friendship. And I feel like Tom sort of does, but he's also not doing that. Like, like I understand that Heron is antisocial and he comes back at Tom with a really nasty comment. But I also feel like Tom did not do this the best way. It
could have been better. Could have been
Nobody's
better.
innocent here except for Neelix.
Sure. And that's fitting. Neelix is chief morale officer.
He is.
So he's a little more in tune with the morale of his crew. And sometimes if somebody's antisocial like Heron is, it can be hard to kind of reach in and know how to interact with them or what's a way to draw them out. Yeah. Especially when he really doesn't want to be.
Right.
I don't know about you, John, but I'm an extrovert.
Mm-hmm.
And I am somehow an introvert magnet. Almost all of my friends, with very few exceptions, are introverts. I'm married to an introvert. I really don't know how this happened because I'm really loud and hyper and scary. And so I'm wondering, could I have figured out how to talk to Heron, or would he just be grumpy at me too? I don't know. Either way, I don't. All that being said, I don't think Tom did.
No.
And B'Elanna's attitude towards the guy, I get that she finds him frustrating to work with because he doesn't do what he's supposed to. But it's still it's not making the matter better by responding in the way that she is.
I think they're not doing the best job here of approaching in true friendship. Poor Billy, he is doing the 24th century version of checking WebMD, and you just don't do that, people. No, you go to the professional.
Yeah, no, going to the professional, he is talking to an AI.
Yeah, right.
So, yes, this is the 24th century version of WebMD. You know what? The man is running around Voyager in his skins.
Look, I would do the same thing. So
I mean, you know what? He's got a slipper. He's got a bathrobe at least. But I'm just like, bro, put on some pants. Like, Voyager's running all the time. Like, it's not like, nobody's out roaming the halls, even if it's nighttime. It just means the night shift's
exactly.
on.
Exactly.
Nobody wants to see in your drawers.
Right.
Put some pants on.
Now, when we're on the flyer, I had to wonder, there's a scene where Janeway and Celeste, they have this exchange about having lunch, and Billy's already in the back preparing lunch. Why is anybody assigned to the replicator? Like, that just seems like a thing. Like it's like having somebody assigned to the vending machine at work. What do you want? Well, I think we're going to have the kind bar. Okay, well, that's punch in numbers 456 for that, and give me your money. Like, no. This is just an interaction between me and the machine. I don't need you in the way.
That's fair. I didn't think about it as him being assigned to the replicator. I just assumed he was in the back doing something else, and he was standing next to the replicator. Oh, by the way, get us two of the Neelix 651s or whatever.
Sounds good. Neelix 651, pasta soup, which
pasta soup.
It didn't look like the best thing, but
I mean, it looked like Progresso.
It kind of did.
It
yeah,
wasn't,
it
wasn't like Campbell's Chicken and Noodle where
Oh no! Yeah.
No, I mean, I threw down on that when I was a kid, but now I'm like,
same.
Not as tasty as it could be.
Right.
Salt.
But I do like the character bits that we're getting here, because I think it's important to know that there are still people on Voyager who simply do not want to be there and resent their predicament. Of course, we get I had to freeze frame. There was a great Janeway eye roll with some of that stuff. So, yeah.
Yeah, when I was watching the episode last night with Mr. Nerdburger, he's like, watch Janeway's face. Her micro expressions are killing me.
So good.
And I was like,
So good.
Ooh.
Yep.
She's like, I can't with this guy.
Yeah.
Tell Celeste, she's got some big time imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, I get it.
I would think that would be more of a thing in the 24th century. I would think that we'd meet more people who would have that, just because, at least in Starfleet, they're the best of the best, but everybody can't be the best of the best.
Right.
So I guess it's kind of the brilliance of an episode like Lower Decks on TNG and a series like Lower Decks is that we get to meet the people who aren't and the people who are finding their way. So, well done.
Yeah. No, I thought that was really interesting. I mean, because who doesn't have imposter syndrome? It's a universal thing, even if you are, got all the fancy pants degrees and all of that good stuff. One of my We Are Starfleet co-hosts described Star Trek once as competency porn.
Yeah, right.
Like everyone is hyper competent, and so if you are even the slightest bit, if you're not as good as the other people around you, you can feel like a complete dumb.
But that is part of the fantasy of Star Trek, though, is that everybody has a place and everybody has the resources they need and everybody has sort of the backing of the people around them. That's part of the beauty of it. Yeah,
it is part of the beauty of it, and yet she still is all like, I got a free pass because I'm a Bajoran.
Yeah.
And so, we can dig into more of that later. But
sure.
I thought that was really interesting that even in the best of circumstances, you still have someone who feels like, I shouldn't be here. I don't deserve to be here.
Yeah.
So we've got this creepy crawling around in Billy's neck. Oh my gosh. I love horror movies, John, but as soon as I see that guy just crawling around in his neck, I was like, nope. I want to run screaming from the room. Disgusting.
That actually surprised me because I did not remember the details of this episode, and I just thought we were in for something else. I didn't know exactly where this story would lead. I thought it might have just ended up a Tech the Tech, which partly it is, but I didn't think it would be a first contact weird creatures thing. And just that little hint of the thing crawling under his neck, I watched that and I was like, okay, Joe Menosky bringing the weird, might have been some of Brandon's influence, a little body horror. So, yeah, not bad there. You mentioned Tal Celeste and her very interesting story, and I thought it was intriguing to have this little hint of bias that would allow a student to go through their courses because she is Bajoran and because you're in this politically sensitive time with what's going on at DS9. So that was a nice little detail to add. And I thought that was kind of adorable, actually. The Delta Flyer must have really tiny photon torpedoes because they fire that thing, hoping that it's a comet, a dark matter protocomet, and you cut to the outside of the ship. I mean, we're used to seeing photon torpedoes that are huge. You can fit a body inside those things. And this is just, here's the flyer, and here's this one little red light coming out. Like, oh, okay, oh.
There's a photon dart.
It is, yeah, a photon dart. Exactly. Yeah. I do have to say, you mentioned the little hint that we get of the odd parasite thing, and then when we actually see it, wow, that was a very impressive effect, and just an odd, creepy little guy who kind of reminded me of the alien creatures from Conspiracy, back to TNG.
Yeah, I just kept calling it the space cinema.
Yeah.
Couldn't think of anything more creative than
Fair.
that. But yeah, still getting skeeved out watching it crawl around in him and then escape.
Oof.
Oh man, I got so mad at Heron.
Yeah.
Like, I was like, bro, just, I know you are very, very smart. You may not be the smartest person in the room right now.
Yeah, right.
and if nothing else, it doesn't matter. You're not the one in charge. So you need to calm down.
Yep.
So frustrated. Especially, and we can talk more about this in discussion, but as a woman who has not been taken seriously by men under my employ, sometimes, I'm like, no, we're not going to do this today, bro.
Right.
I know we should be past all of this by the time we get to the 24th century. There's no misogyny or anything like that. But just seeing that, I'm like, is this a little flavor of misogyny, or does this guy just really think he's the smartest person in the room because he has all these
of the above? It really feels that way. He has a disrespect for authority anyway, and I think it kind of smacks worse because it's Janeway, and Janeway probably is the smartest one in the room,
Yeah.
He's the most qualified, and experienced.
Right.
Yeah. Now, I mentioned at the top that it was really impressive to see those new effects kind of going in and out of Voyager in the teaser segment. But then, as we get toward the end of the show, and we're really flexing again, some gorgeous shots of this gas giant and the Delta Flyer. Now, some of it, in retrospect, it doesn't hold up as well as other shots, and you're kind of going back and forth between some shots that work really well and some shots that don't. But overall, it's just very ambitious. There's a lot going on screen.
Yeah, I thought it looked really cool. Even for today, it's like, you know what, that still looks pretty good. I ain't mad about it. And maybe I'm a little softer on this kind of thing because I love like cheesy sci-fi effects.
Sure.
I think they're wonderfully charming. But I didn't even feel like this even looked cheesy.
Yeah,
I thought it still looked pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, maybe we can talk a little more about this in discussion if you feel it's appropriate. But Yes, Billy is having this experience where he's had this awfulness inside his body. What's wrong with you? Everything.
Right.
Something's really wrong with you right now, dude.
Yeah.
So once he gets the space centipede out, that little critter out, like he basically says, "Oh, I'm cured of my hypochondria now," and so. Is he really cured, or is this like an underlying anxiety thing?
Right.
Or I'm not a doctor, not a counselor or therapist or anything like that, so I don't know how hypochondria works, other than you feel like something's wrong with you. But him having this, for want of better terminology, a near-death experience or a really traumatic health scare. Does that make everything else seem smaller to him? Or did he have some sort of because he was talking about how he could hear the creature's thoughts, because he had that connection with the creature. Did that help him get past that
interesting.
concept?
Yeah, because there was a connection there. I could see it going both ways. Like, I could see going through that experience, either putting things in perspective, as they do here, like, oh, okay, all that other stuff is nonsense. I just went through a very real thing that was traumatic, and now I am past it. Or I could see it being the other way, like, no, things in the universe are out to get me, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm definitely done. I'm going to relocate to Deck 15. I will never see any of you again.
Absolutely. I could totally have seen it more likely having gone that way. Like, and nope, I'm going to become Bubble Boy. Nobody's getting in or out.
Now, let's talk about this. I mean, Heron has to have, well, I don't know if he has to, but he has this heroic moment where they launch the escape pod from the Delta Flyer, which, by the way, looks huge. I do not understand the physics of any of this, because teeny tiny photon torpedo, apparently giant hidden escape pod somewhere, and more than one, I think. So I don't know where the other one is. That's still inside Delta Flyer somewhere. I don't know if I necessarily buy the change of character. I don't know that that is an earned moment, but I guess that's the way to go. And let me ask you something. Did they actually kill all of those little critters? Because you see, they beam him back on board, and you see an explosion behind them. Are they all gone?
You know, the episode is unclear. Yeah. And I had the same question. I was like, are we even going to find out what this little thing was? Mm-hmm. Or who these creatures are? That were they actually trying to make contact? Or, there's no clear answer. And I guess that's not the point of the episode. But it bugged me. I mean, for want of better terminology, it bugged me that I didn't know what these bugs were. So.
Clever. I like it.
What's more explosive? Matter colliding with antimatter, or social colliding with antisocial?
All right, so we teased a few topics in the last segment that we may come back to here. And I think one of those central themes, and you alluded to it about management. I love that you said that 20% of the problems take up 80% of your time. I totally get that. And I there are a few times in my career, I should say my professional life, not necessarily my career here, but a few times in my professional life that I've had a managerial role on bigger or smaller scales. And I can't say that is a thing that I know a lot about. I just sort of ended up in those positions. But let me ask you, because I feel like maybe this is something that Star Trek has instilled in me, and maybe it isn't always correct all the time, but I feel like the idea is to let people grow into their roles and then kind of keep nurturing and pushing them beyond their limitations. I mean, on the one hand, you have 7 of 9, and she just wants the right person in the job right now. And if you're not doing your job, then you're doing it wrong, or you were the wrong person. And there is no wiggle room there at all. But of course, that's 7, and of course, that's how she approaches it. And then you got Chakotay, who really should be the people manager here in this position. And he's saying, like, we just we should just get them out of there. We should just move these, take them off duty or whatever. And I'm thinking, well, first of all, you have a people shortage on board Voyager anyway. But second of all, like, it isn't the ideal, isn't the Starfleet vision, the Star Trek sort of fantasy of it all, is that, like, no, we take everybody and we really help grow them to be to reach their potential, And is that just fantasy, or is that a thing that can actually be done with the right approach to management?
So I have a little bit of management experience. I for a few years I worked as a manager for. By the time I quit, I was running 3 college bookstores at one time.
Wow.
Which, fun fact, no one should ever do that. That's a terrible way to spend your time. Don't ever do that. Even if you, and like, there are a lot of reasons why that was a very bad situation for me to be in. But what I took from that experience is, I'm a people person. I'm pretty good at communicating and talking with people and working with people. Mm-hmm. You know, and you try to play to your employees' strengths as much as you can. These folks that we're talking about here today in this episode, they've all got different strengths or whatever, but they're also hesitant to be pushed past their limits.
I mean, even more so, they have gone to lengths to remove themselves from any possibility of like being discovered, being useful, being a part of what the ship does. And I also have to think, though, that even if you are somebody who is maybe avoiding work or avoiding risk, whatever the case may be, I would think that you would still want to be useful at some point, or again, the upper levels of management here, ultimately ending with Chakotay and then above him Janeway, would find the right place for you. Yeah. You know, every time we go into sickbay, it's just the doctor and occasionally Tom, but we rarely talk about that.
Yeah. Nobody came in to replace Cass, so...
Yeah, right. Yeah. Maybe Telfer needs medical training. Maybe that's the solution.
I mean,
here.
the man knows how to run the tricorder, so let him do it. Let him do it on people other than himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think like the best leaders are the ones who are able to do what Janeway does here and try to push your people as gently as you can to test their limits, test their mettle a little bit, but also to think as like, how can we do this together? How can we do this as a team? How can we work together on this? Especially when you have someone as antisocial as Heron. We were talking a little bit about, shouldn't Chakotay have caught like these guys? And yes, he should have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I love how Janeway takes responsibility here. Like she's a caring captain. Like I mentioned before we hit record on this that Mr. Dirty Blogger, my husband, has been he just finished watching Voyager for the first time, and one of the things that impressed him about Janeway is that if somebody tells Janeway something's wrong, she listens. She's a very
except for the time she doesn't.
Except for the time she doesn't. But on the whole, she tends to listen. But she tends to also assume the best in other people. And I admire that because that's hard to do. And so here, like, she's like, hey, these are my crew, and they've not gotten the attention they need, and so I want to work with that. Talking about Seven, like hammering down on the efficiency report, and talking about these crewmen who have quote unquote slipped through the cracks. Would they have continued to slip through the cracks had they not been brought up in this meeting?
Sure,
I don't know.
Sure, and they may not have, and I think the real danger of that though is like, the day that there is the next Borg attack and they compromise a plasma conduit or whatever, and the only person to fix it is down on deck 15, you have to know that person is aware and they've got your back and they got the rest of the crew's back. And part of the way to do that is make sure that they have some sort of attachment to the crew. I feel like, each of these people has the potential to be reached in some way. That is the beauty of the story here, is Janeway taking the time to do that. How do I bond with Telfer? How do I bond with Celeste? She's more successful there. The thing with Heron, I'm still not totally sold on. I'm not sure she actually reached him. I think for whatever reason, he just had this moment that I don't feel like is totally earned. But she's finding the inroads, and she really finds it with Celeste being able to share a common experience. I pulled all-nighters. I struggled at the academy, too. Okay, granted, maybe she wasn't struggling as hard as Celeste was. But at least there's some way to find that common ground. I think that, Seven is just looking at the numbers. I totally get that. Somebody is... I want to point this at B'Elanna, because if you go all the way down the chain, you go all the way down to Deck 15, that is an engineering problem. That is an engineering issue. And if you are a manager who can so easily, well, first of all, talk badly about fellow crew members. Oh, what does the Borg Queen want, as you pointed out? And then literally have the level of detachment. Here, I hand an order to somebody. They hand it off to somebody else. And then all I care about is the number that shows up on my computer within a few seconds or minutes after the order is given. That's a management problem. Yeah. that is a B'Elanna Torres problem at that point. So then do we kick it back to Chakotay and Janeway and say, ooh, you know what? Okay, maybe it wasn't your responsibility to know about Heron and everything going on with him, but it is your responsibility to know about B'Elanna's team and how she is encouraging and managing her team.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's definitely a breakdown of communication somewhere along the lines. But I admire that Janeway, as the captain, said, you know what? I'll handle it.
Yeah.
I just think that...
End of the day,
it's her thing. So...
Yeah. Got to be her at the end of the day, for sure. But I hope that serves as a lesson to everybody else. And that's what I want to see. It's almost like you need the epilogue to the epilogue, which is Janeway in mess hall sitting down with Heron and having an actual personal conversation. Not too personal. She is the captain.
Yeah.
but having an actual personal conversation instead of something that comes across as challenging him, you know? And look, Heron's a special case, but everybody's a special case.
Sure.
Everybody has their flaws or their issues that need to be addressed in different ways. I get that. But it's easy to see how the rest of the crew has just sort of abandoned the, even the possibility that these people have something to contribute. But to your point earlier, it is easy to focus your attention on the people who do a good job. It's easy to just rely on them because they're doing a good job. And then the downside of that equation is just trying to fix the things that are wrong with that minority who aren't pulling their weight.
Yeah. So it's either way, it's a tough one. It's a tough one, but regardless, the problem is being corrected in this episode. So yeah.
Oh,
John, I unless you have something more to say on that, I would really love to talk a little bit about the conversation that Janeway and Heron have about, Janeway says, I wouldn't trade the experiences and the relationships I've made over the past 6 years for anything, even if that was not plan A.
Yeah, that is an interesting bit of dialogue, which... I think you and I could very easily argue both sides of that.
Sure. I feel strongly both ways.
Yeah. So what do you think there?
Well, I mean, I tend to, maybe it's just because Janeway's my captain or maybe because I am wildly optimistic. But I tend to lean more Janeway here because... thinking back to what the decision Janeway made in Caretaker of I can't destroy I can't put this group of people in jeopardy, so I'm going to strand my entire crew. I know you and Norman have gone back and forth on that, the whole thing, and I'm not here to rehash that argument. Regardless, that decision was made. Here they are. No one expected to end up in the Delta Quadrant.
Right.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition or to end up in the Delta Quadrant. So, but even in less than ideal circumstances, the ability to find gratitude for what you have learned through that experience or what you have gained in that experience. I was having a similar conversation the other day. Do I wish that had happened? No. Like talking about, bad circumstances I've experienced. Like, do I wish that had happened to me? No. Not at all.
Right.
Would I be the person I am now having not experienced that? Probably not. And I like who I am now because of the things I gained from that. Do I wish I could have gained those things another way? Absolutely. But it's right. I tend to lean more Janeway here, but I also understand that Heron's like, I didn't sign up for this. I only did this because I had to get a year in order to get into this fellowship or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And so I get his dismay and his desire just to check out until hopefully we get home so I can continue with the original trajectory I had for my life.
Right.
But I mean, realistically, how many years have they shaved off the trip at this point? They're going to be back in 50, 55 years?
Hey, that's fine. He can pick up his career then.
Yeah, dude, you'll be 85. It's cool.
Well, I think that's part of the problem with Voyager is that the whole series hinges on this premise. It hinges on this premise that we are constantly trying to get back home. This whole thing is a mistake that we're here. Well, yes, there is part of an intentionality to it, but they didn't plan to be there that far away for that long. So we kind of miss some potential for really relatable personal drama when you do things like, okay, get rid of the Maquis storyline. Get rid of the idea that there are people who definitely don't belong in this crew. And then you sort of lose track of the idea that there are all kinds of people who may feel very differently about their circumstance. Sure. You go back to the 37s and, okay, nobody wanted to stay on that planet. I feel like maybe somebody would have wanted to stay on that planet, perhaps. I feel like there are crew members who maybe aren't thrilled about the circumstance, but they don't hold Janeway personally responsible. They're not carrying a grudge about Janeway. But then you might have people like this who has stewed away for 6 years down on Deck 15, and the voice in their head has just constantly told them, Janeway did this to you. And ruined your career, ruined your life. So, it's interesting. I get the intention of what Janeway's saying about how she wouldn't trade the friendships that she's made. I get that. At the same time, I think you have to acknowledge this screwed up everybody's life.
Sure.
Nobody signed up for this. But kind of going back to your point, those experiences have now shaped us, and we can't change the past. But we are absolutely making the best out of what we have now. And we do have to show gratitude for, our fellow crew members who have kept us alive. And for the very good decisions made by the captain when she's not making bad decisions.
Janeway's never made a bad decision. John, what are you talking about?
Equinox. So, it's a little bit, I feel like she's a little bit on her high horse here, talking to Heron this way, because Heron has a unique set of experiences, just like everybody on board has a unique set of experiences. Right. And you don't know how much that has affected their perspective from being there. And I just wish we had the opportunity over the last 6 years to really dig into that, because I feel like everybody on that ship has got a story, and we've only really gotten into a handful of those.
Right.
Yeah.
No, I think that's really fair. I think that's really fair. I wish that I wish we got a little more of, and I don't know, maybe this was all that was needed for the episode, but getting to watch Janeway go back and forth with Heron was really good, because you've got two of the most stubborn people that you could possibly have right here.
Right.
And watching them face off was actually, it was really good, because, I see it both ways.
Yeah.
But, I mean, the reality is, like, Heron still wants to hang on to this idea that, he's basically sulking. Like, I can't do the thing I want to do. Well, I'm just going to check out for the next 50 to 70 years.
and make it miserable for everybody around me.
I'm just going to hide out on deck 15 and not talk to anyone, and live I'm happy in my mind palace.
Yeah. Which, again, is really not that hard to understand.
Yeah. No, I get it.
There is something relatable about him in that respect. Not the bad attitude, but there is something relatable in the mindset that got him there. Yeah. I kind of get that. I keep coming back to this thing about how avoidant can you possibly be when it's not just that you've only got 140 people on board around you. Those are the only 140 people that you will have the opportunity to interact with at all. And I would assume that in that 6 years, with the potential of having been out there for 70 years, people are going to find new hobbies. They're going to find new relationships. Things are going to change. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see. I hope that we'll talk about it as we get closer to the end. But hope he's softened up a little bit, because I know maybe it's just me being an extrovert. It's like I cannot imagine like wanting to go hide for the next 70 years and be left alone with my own thoughts. So that I mean, let all the introverted people please explain this to me. but I would die.
Recommended new theme song for Telfer. I've Got You Under My Skin. It'll be a hit at the next party in the mess hall.
All right, we shepherded this story along. Hopefully good. Hopefully we did a good job shepherding it along. But that brings us to the very end, where we get to wrap it all up with a couple of important questions. First of all, did the episode hold up? And second of all, did we learn anything? What is the message or the moral or the meaning? And Ashley, you know how Mission Log works, but just as a refresher here, when I ask if the episode held up, well, you might have different criteria for that. It might be that the writing was great, but maybe the effects took you out of it. Or maybe the acting was great, but the pacing didn't work for you. So I leave that up to your interpretation. Does Good Shepherd hold up?
Good Shepherd still works for me. And
okay,
there's a few reasons for that. I think this is a really cool episode because it's less about Janeway's crew, and it's more of a character study for Janeway. Yeah. We watch her sit in the big chair, give orders, delegate, and here we really get to see her just get her hands dirty, and I really like that. But I think it's not just about how Janeway is a good leader, but also as a teacher and a mentor. I've been fortunate enough to have a few really good mentors in my life, and they've walked with me through hard things, and they push me to be my best even when I didn't feel like I could. And as hard as that was, I needed that push because I'm as stubborn as Janeway, and I think that's part of the reason I love her so much. Is like, yeah, she's right, and everybody just needs to shut up. No, but I don't know that I would have had. I don't know that I would have pushed myself as hard, if not for that extra push from a good mentor. I'd be a really different person without those people. Now, when I was in high school, I was fortunate to have a lot of really good teachers, but the best teacher that I have ever had, and to this day, was my high school Spanish teacher. And I'm going to name drop her here, Senora Melba Kendrick.
Okay.
She made learning Spanish fun. Her class was my favorite class because she made it so fun. And it wasn't just like her standing up at the board, like teaching us how to conjugate verbs. Like, she would play with us. She would teach us dances and songs and would make up all kinds of silly stuff. So we would learn, the language and learn how to speak. She was maybe like 10, 11 years older than me. And so she was one of the younger teachers at the school. And so I don't know if it's because she was a little bit younger. She wasn't that much older than me. But she became not just my teacher, but she was my friend as well. Like, she was my mentor, and I could go to her. I went to her for advice when I was in high school, and I went to her for advice when I was in college too. To the point today we're still friends. She came to my wedding, stay connected with her. For a little while before I had a career managing college bookstores, I worked as an instructional assistant at an elementary school. And so what I learned from her about how to connect with her students, I tried to do that to connect with the kids I worked with. So even though I wasn't like a teacher, I was working with the kids who sometimes were struggling. Like the school I worked at was a Title I school, meaning they got money from the federal government to have an instructional assistant in every classroom. Because at the time, it was the highest poverty school in the county. So you have an instructional assistant there working specifically with kids on reading and phonics and things like that. So I spent a lot of time with the kids who needed the most help with that. And part of the way my style was, I enjoy like the teaching aspect and helping kids learn. But I know if people think that you care about them or believe that you care about them, they are more likely to care about what you have to say. As an instructor, it's not just I was even trying to pretend that I cared. It's like I legitimately cared about these students because, I want them to succeed and to do well and all of that. And so I took those things I learned from my teacher and tried to apply them myself. And that's what I see Janeway doing here, is that she is not she's not just being the captain. She's making a concentrated effort to connect with these crew members who, for whatever reason, are misfits, as Heron says, or they're not living up to their potential, or they could be better, but they're holding themselves back for whatever reason. And I really love watching Janeway do that. And I think it shows a lot about her character and who she is as a person and as a leader, as a mentor.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, honestly, this episode held up better than I thought it would. This happens a lot. When I watch something for the first time for Mission Log, I'm a little all over the place, and I feel like I'm being hypercritical, and I'm taking my notes sort of stream of consciousness, and I'm picking apart things that I don't like and asking questions as if I'm there in the writer's room, like, why are you doing this? But then I watch it a few more times, and I feel like the story gets a little better, or maybe it's just the familiarity now that makes it a little bit better. I feel like the introduction of these characters is pretty strong. Obviously, there is a huge parallel to the TNG episode Lower Decks. In fact, I had to go back and see if Joe Menosky worked on that episode. His name is not listed there, but he was employed by Star Trek at the time, so it's quite possible that either he lent a hand in there somewhere that was uncredited, or that story just kind of stuck with him. But this is Voyager's version of Lower Decks. I kept thinking, imagine how this would have played if we already knew these characters in some way over the long haul. And you think about the characters who have shown up and then disappeared, like Samantha Wildman, Lieutenant Carey. And you just go, but wait a minute. Like, we started a thing here, Vorik. We started this thing where we had these characters who were going to be around, and you go, oh, wait, I recognize them after 2, 3, 4 episodes, and then they're just gone. And then we bring in all these other new characters. I think they're excellent. I think it's so fascinating to show their cracks and how they've avoided responsibility and they've avoided the potential friendships with the crew. I think that's great. But I also thought, it would be so much more satisfying if there had just been hints of these people all along.
Yeah.
Even if it wasn't them by name, just the idea that there are people who are skirting responsibility or people who resent that they are there. And then I feel like there's even more payoff when Janeway is able to reach somebody who has been holding this grudge for 6 years. So I don't think it's wrong that this episode is told the way that it's told. I think that it would have been really cool if they had done it that way.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit unfair here that what the script does is it takes these very relatable, very human conditions, like not fitting in, not being sure of yourself. And then because it is a 45-minute TV script, you have to amplify all of those for one episode into 3 characters. Again, it works. It would have felt much more genuine to me if those traits had been explored over time in people who we knew and had many more sides already. But that's just me sort of with the 2020 hindsight, right?
Sure. Yeah, and I don't think any of that's unfair. It would have been awesome to have had hints of these characters and maybe seen them pop up earlier.
Yeah.
Or maybe if not these characters, let's take some of these side characters that we'd seen before. Can we integrate them? But that being said, it still works for me.
Oh, yeah. And I think it does work very well as an episode. It is the same structure as the TNG episode Lower Decks, which is great in its own right. I think, though, we come from the episodic structure of TNG to then the more experimental serialized storytelling of DS9 with this very rich tapestry of B and C players, And Voyager really has a lot of freedom to do its own thing, and it is also very experimental. So I'd love to have seen a bit more, just a bit more enthusiasm for doing something kind of crazy like that. Like, here's this character we met 3 times before, and now we're going to explore them a little bit more. Yeah. But all that said, and I've repeated this in the last few episodes because it has really stood out in the last few episodes, is that the guest players are there, yes, to be their own characters, yes, to tell a great story, but they need to serve the primary characters. And they do that here brilliantly because this is a very good Janeway story. And for as many criticisms as we have had about Janeway's character in the past, again, looking at you, Equinox, there are times you just go, well, wait a minute. This is a completely different Janeway from the one that we got in seasons 1 through 3. Yeah, the character needs to evolve, but is this a character who will also just completely go against their own values? This is an episode where I feel like it is a full return of Janeway to her core values, which is about dedication to the mission. It's about supporting her crew. It is great management in meeting people where they are. Well, okay, I'm getting ahead of myself because then we get to the message, the moral meaning message, Let me backtrack a little bit. This is not an episode about the scientific method, but there's some good science going on in this episode, and I like that, or at least a little reference to some good science happening here. Heron is smart, no question about it, but he is so determined to just force his intellect onto any problem that comes his way and pronounce it solved. Meanwhile, Celes is full of doubt about herself, but she works methodically to get to the bottom where she might be wrong in order to learn from it. And Janeway guides her through evidence and inductive reasoning, and that is great. So I love seeing them do the work of Starfleet in this episode. That is cool. And you mentioned it before. There's a lot of imposter syndrome going on in this episode. And there's a lack of confidence, but there is also a lot of personal understanding shown by a person in leadership. And that is what I just love seeing. So this episode is a lesson in leadership, but it is a kind of leadership that puts humanity first. And that is what I love about this captain. Janeway puts herself in the mission, and she is an active participant with her crew. And she knows that she needs to get to know them personally in order to be an effective leader and get them to be better for themselves. So this is the best of all worlds when it comes to them learning a lesson, her exercising her abilities as a leader, and really showing like I said, the work of Starfleet, the work of exploration, the work of science. It's kind of got it all. So this might be one of those episodes that slips by you in some respect, but I would say, wait, go back and watch it because it really exemplifies a lot of the Star Trek ideals, at least when it comes to this kind of workplace drama, right? So what about you in terms of morals, meanings, messages, Ashley?
I think for me, the moral meaning message here is you've got like the question of what does it mean to be a good leader or a good manager, a good mentor? You know, there's an image I've seen circulate around the web, you know, multiple times about the differences between being a boss and being a leader. And the image that represents the boss, quote unquote, style of management. The boss is at the back, fingers pointing ahead, while the team is pulling a heavy load. Right. Now, conversely, the parallel image in this that represents a leader has the leader ahead of the team and is pulling the heavy load with them and kind of directing them on where to go. Kind of a simple visual way to understand what is the difference between authoritarian leadership and servant leadership. And having worked under both, I much preferred the servant leadership. And I attempted, when I have been in leadership positions, I have attempted to be that kind of servant leader who isn't afraid to roll up her sleeves and get her hands dirty right there with her team. Keep your shirt tucked in.
Wait.
Go down with the ship. Never abandon a member of your crew.
There we go. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And here you see Janeway really doing that last one. Never abandon a member of your crew. For all their disagreements, even at the end, even if you're right, I would like a little more explanation here. But Heron's like, hey, maybe I really haven't been living. I've just been stuck inside my own head. And he does like the daring thing of, I'm going to take one for the team.
It's the one moment that I feel like isn't earned, but I also feel like we have to get there in this story. You know, and good on them. They didn't sacrifice him.
Yeah.
Because that would have been a bit too much. Yes, they're able to beam him back, but we have to show these characters growing. And that is the ultimate way that he can grow.
But also that really leans back into the Good Shepherd parable. You know, the Good Shepherd leaves the 99 and goes to find the one. The Good Shepherd lays his life down for the sheep, is what it says in John 10. And that's exactly what Janeway does. She goes back for him. She's like, no, we got to circle back. We can't let him do this. She's following her own rules there. But it shows the lengths to which she will go to make sure that she's taking care of everyone who's in her care. And I love that about Janeway.
Excellent. Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. If you'd like to support us directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog for early access to shows and the Mission Log Discord. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com. And for more Star Trek news and discussion, visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, live fast and prosper.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Special thanks to consulting producers, Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Chris Garris, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Shabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takachi. Did we ever find out what machine Tom Morello is raging against in the bowels of the ship? Leave your guesses in the comments. End transmission.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.